All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, former Vice President Joe Biden finally did it. I join you all in applauding him for finally winning a presidential primary after 32 years of trying. You know what they say, if you get knocked down, keep getting back up for the next 30 years until you can win. Jokes aside, the former vice president undeniably won a blowout victory in South Carolina, which has breathed some hope into the woeful Democratic establishment. The moderate endorsements rolled in for Biden. Debbie Wasserman Schultz to the former Virginia governor, Tim Kaine. At the same time, his campaign revealed that it had raised $5 million whopping dollars in a single 24-hour period, just one of the single best days on record for the former vice president. And just to give you an idea of how the cable news syndicate is reacting to Biden's win, I present as evidence this cringeworthy tweet from Morning Joe host Mika Brzezinski. Leave the memes to us, boomers. We've got this. But the problem is, these people all seem to have forgotten just how much of a sorry state Biden's campaign remains in. That $5 million that Biden brought in is basically meaningless for Super Tuesday. And as we covered on the show on Friday, Biden has been completely absent from Super Tuesday states, both in terms of appearances and in terms of advertising dollars. Before South Carolina, his campaign bragged about a 6-figure ad buy, which when you put it up against a Michael Bloomberg's 10-figure ad buy, pretty pathetic. You can argue many things about how Biden will get a bump, how voters will be strategic, coalesce around a Sanders alternative instead of back Bloomberg, but things on Super Tuesday are really not looking that great for him. Polling whiz Steve Kornacki ran the best case scenario numbers for Joe Biden's delegate count yesterday, and even with dramatic optimism for the former vice president, he still comes in second. A slate of polls also came out a day after Biden's victory, showing him either tied or in second place in many key states throughout Super Tuesday, looking especially vulnerable in states like Texas, North Carolina, and elsewhere. It's possible he might get a bump, but his complete lack of organization will hurt him given the tens of thousands of early votes that have already been cast. So overall, in my assessment, the tenor of the race has significantly changed. It is now a complete and total war for a broker convention, especially with Elizabeth Warren's declaration that Crystal will expound on in detail. Biden is a very weak candidate with no organization facing a grassroots movement which has proven the ability to dramatically overperform in some key instances. I would generally bet my money against his performance. But don't forget, there is a lot of money on the line for these people, and his South Carolina win has given a glimmer of hope and permission to vote to an establishment class that is desperate to stop Sanders. Biden's role currently is to continue obscuring the fact that he can barely form complete sentences and rack up some wins in more moderate states like Virginia and Alabama, allowing the Democratic establishment to coalesce around him. All they need is for Biden to amass a modest amount of delegates behind Sanders going into the convention, and they can execute their true plan. He'll pick a vice presidential candidate who the media and they all love. You'll hardly notice before he takes the stage as the nominee. And that's how I look at it right now, Crystal, which is that I think Biden is an incredibly weak guy, always bet kind of against the ability. I think South Carolina turns out the South Carolina firewall thing is true, but I think it's a true anomaly relative to his performance in all these other states.
Yeah.
And Super Tuesday and these places are going to be, I think, a true test for the fact that he has no money and he has no organization. He's basically just trying to hang on by the seat of his pants all the way up to that convention. But the thing is that he has given the establishment now permission to begin laying all of the groundwork in order to give him the nomination regardless of all that.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Delaware, South Carolina may literally be the best state in the nation for Joe Biden. Just in terms of, first, this great affinity with Barack Obama. They were the state that really, propelled him to the nomination. Obviously, deep affinity there, especially with older African-American voters. You had the Clyburn endorsement, which I have to say, I could not have imagined how huge that would have been.
I didn't realize
50% of voters saying that was very important to them. And then you have the fact that it's a much older demographic than most other states in the country. So Bernie actually won young African Americans in the state still, even with Biden performing so overwhelmingly at the top line level and overall with African Americans. So it is a sort of demographic anomaly for Joe. The other thing I think that the media and the Biden campaign and Pete and all these people are kind of misreading is this idea that the right case to make is the Stop Bernie case. Because Bernie Sanders still, and this is what has never been understood by the media, he has the highest favorability rating among Democratic primary voters. There isn't this deep anxiety or fear about Bernie or distaste or dislike of Bernie Sanders out there in the general public that does exist at great levels within the Democratic establishment and within elite media circles. No, I think the case for Joe is still the electability case. That is the case that he should be making. And the idea that everyone is going to now say, okay, this is the guy to stop Biden. Yes, the donor class is going to do that. The Democratic establishment is going to do that. That is significant, but I don't think it's a compelling case to make to most Democratic primary voters.
I think that's right, which is that the establishment is making the almost quiet part out loud mistake where they're like, no, this is about stopping Bernie, whenever Biden's campaign should be all in on, no, this is the first state, I mean, this isn't true, but they can say this is the first state which is totally representative of the Democratic Party, of its base, and that's the one I won, and that's why I am the most electable. And I was actually telling you in one of the breaks that one of the interesting things is right now Bernie is best poised to win Democratic states that traditionally vote Democrat.
And swing states.
Biden is best poised in hard Republican states. Well, Biden could flip that around on its head and be like, oh, see, like people in red states like me. So he has got all of these talking points on his head where he can easily swing it as I am the most electable. I don't think any of it is true. I mean, I think he's by far the weakest candidate. Whenever it comes to all these things. But the real test is going to be, I think, not even just Super Tuesday, it's right after Super Tuesday. Because it's like he's got enough time now that places like Michigan, where he should have traditional strength, but which Bernie is trouncing him right now. Those states, Florida, can you actually close the gap there? Well, that's what I'm actually watching very closely, because that's a test of whether he has the ability to organize now that he has money and some energy behind it.
Well, the other talking point that's very amusing to me is like suddenly now, because Biden has like a narrow lead in the popular vote, they're like, oh, he's winning the popular vote. So I guess for like a day here, we're going to care about the popular vote again, which look, guys, anyone who wants to just come out and say whoever wins the popular vote will be the nominee, I think that the Sanders camp would be happy to take that to take that bet, and I'm sure that talking point will disappear tomorrow. But I also want to say, you know, I think the Sanders campaign did take their eye off the ball here a little bit. They counted Joe Biden out more than they should have. They focused their fire on Bloomberg more so, which was important because he represented a real risk, especially with that much money. But, you know, the messaging we saw going into Iowa about Biden's flip-flopping on Social Security and how he couldn't be trusted to not cut that program and want to work with Republicans to cut that program, that's a message that could have had real salience in South Carolina.
And they did not hammer that home.
And they did not prosecute that case. I mean, I dug into the polling, and part of why that message is so compelling, it's Social Security is the number one issue for seniors, and it's the number two issue for African Americans. So the demographic that Joe Biden was so strong with in South Carolina, this could have been an effective case. He wasn't hit on the debate stage. He was allowed to just do his thing because everybody just sort of feels bad for him. Of course, the media didn't press him on how he like made up this story about getting arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela. But you can't just blame the media. The Sanders campaign and anyone who wants to win this thing has to also make the case. And they did not realize that Biden could have this kind of strength coming out of South Carolina and be a real threat, as he now is.
The way they got Biden the first time was they turned the media into questioning his Iraq war record and on Social Security. They beat it home. Now, they did kill him in Iowa and New Hampshire. There's no question. But they underestimated, and you're right, they took their eye off the ball significantly. And I think that there was a little bit of arrogance on their part by walking around thinking that they truly had this thing in the bag. And you know what? You have to run scared. That's really what it's all about. Otherwise, that's what happens is you get beaten by 48% of the vote in South Carolina. And now you're in a position where not guaranteed, but very likely, broker convention scenario, you have to fight like hell. And that's just not something that we have not seen the ability for Sanders and the campaign. I mean, Sirota is pretty good at this, but for the rest of them, they don't have the ability or the want, it seems, in order to twist the knife. And I think that that's really going to come back to bite them because now Biden has given people permission to vote for him. And that's a dangerous thing for Bernie Sanders.
Bernie has a much harder time going after Joe than he does going after Bloomberg.
Exactly.
Because they're friends and they have this long history. And so even when he's been pushed, you gotta talk about his record. You gotta prosecute the case.
Yeah.
You gotta do this on the debate stage. It always is my friend. It always is softened. It always is pulling the punches. I do think that there's an element almost of like pity or empathy because you see him struggling even to put together a coherent sentence, but it doesn't matter. You have to remember what the stakes are, and you can bet the Biden campaign is not going to be pulling their punches.
They don't
Democratic
care.
establishment's not going to be pulling their punches. Elizabeth Warren and now Pete Buttigieg, all these, they're not going to be pulling their punches. So it's time to get serious and focus on what the real obstacle is.
Right. People here need to understand the jolt of life that went through the city at this Biden win. Because they were like, fine. They're like, because they were demoralized. They thought they were dead. They were like, oh, God, I'm never going to make any money in this town ever again. But this has gone through them with the jolt of lightning, and they are going to pour hundreds of millions behind this man. He's got a super PAC, all the infrastructure the man needs. Now it's all they're going to be all in on Joe. They weren't in the past, and that is a fundamental divide from where it was previously to where it is right now.
Well, and don't forget, the bar is different for Joe. Bernie basically has to win or come close to an outright majority of delegates to win. Joe doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
He just has to come relatively close to Bernie, not get blown out. And then you have the Super Friends ticket getting together. Certainly, if he wins a plurality over Bernie, 100% super delegates will give it to him. But even if he's able to come close, he'll probably be able to overtake it.
Because what you do, like I said, he'll pick a nominee. I think Stacey Abrams. That's what I really think it's going to be. Pick Stacey Abrams. The media loves Stacey. Stacey plays money and plays ball with big money and Michael Bloomberg and all of that. You add it up together. Diverse person. You've got Joe Biden. He says, consensus now. He's so old. Stacey will be the pick. In 4 years or 8 years or whatever. You can all see it.
Yep.
We all know how it's going to go.
Yep. Very interesting.
I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.